I just can't handle fake garbage. Let's pigeonhole what a CEO or a managing director is. It's not a time for humility. If I knew what I was going to have to go through.
I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Dad, also known as Damian Arthur. Dad, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Happy to be here.
Well, this podcast is for business owners, so I think what would be good, Dad, is if you could just give a bit of a brief overview of the two businesses that you own and operate at the moment.
Sure. I guess before I do, my appearance is probably not too business-like tonight. It's quite cold out here, but it's nice to be outside. And if I don't hold this little fella, he's going to be jumping all over me anyway. So that's why I'm rugged up, and that's why I'm holding the cat.
Yeah, I was going to say it's freezing outside. I'm surprised you're out there anyway.
Oh, but it's nice though. It's crisp. It's nice. So the businesses that I have at the moment, I have two manufacturing businesses in the metals industry, metals manufacturing, and so one is just pure fabrication, so there are no electronics or anything involved with the products that we make there. And in the other business, we actually do produce items which have electronics, are a bit more technical, and that is what I just commonly refer to as hot water solutions. So that includes hot water urns, food steamers, wall-mounted boiling water units, and a whole host of other products as well.
Cool. So in the manufacturing industry there with two businesses, but let's take a step back now. So I think it's very interesting to see where people start. So when did you actually start your career, and what were you doing?
Well, you're talking about after I left school.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know that far back. This could be a lot of podcasts.
yeah. I think that far back, first job, I think is always yours. Is always interesting.
A little bit back in 1988 when I was a little bit of a fella. No, I joined the army at 18 years old. So I finished year 12 at school and went into the army. And I joined as an army apprentice, which was a wonderful scheme that they had back in the day. They don't have it anymore. But anyway, so that was back in 1988, a long time ago. So I did my apprenticeship as a diesel mechanic. And the reason I wanted to join the army was with the career in mind, but also my father was a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was your great-grandfather, your grandfather and your great-grandfather. He was into Brooks, so he was actually World War II. So we do have a bit of a history in the family of in the military there. So I guess I sort of continued that. And I was in the army for around about 10, or just over 10 years. I after I got my apprenticeship as a mechanic, I applied to go to what they call Dumtroom, which is that's where you do the officer training in the army, and they were stupid enough to accept me. So so I went and did the 18-month course and came out as a lieutenant. And long story short, I stayed in for another 6 years, and I took leave of the army as a captain. So that was at the age of around about 27, if I remember correctly, 28. 28.
And fast forwarding now to what you're doing in business, have there been any key things you reckon that you've learned from your military background that have helped you in
Oh,
business?
definitely. I mean, one of the questions, actually, that was the first question you had in the show notes there. And what I did was I actually kind of applied a bit of a military principle in answering all these questions when I put my notes down. And that was in the saying, when you've got to go on operations and you've got, you don't have much time, you've got to get everything together. And what we used to say was, what you don't pack in 10 minutes, you probably don't need to take. So I applied that principle and thought, well, what are the first things that I think about when you've asked me that question? What are the first things that come to mind? And I guess the first thing that came to mind was values. And I know it's a bit of an overstated word these days, values, journey, and all these buzzwords.
I know you hate the word journey, but you still use it because you can't think of anything better sometimes.
I actually coined all these buzzwords. I should have written to the Oxford Dictionary. I came up with a word called corporatologicalizationalisms. Yeah, that just means these corporate words that just become the buzzwords of the day. I don't know. Anyway, I'll use.
Yeah, just use them anyway. So
So
values.
let's get the values. All right. So in no particular order, but what did the military teach me? Or what did I take? What did I take away from the military and then utilise in the corporate game? And I just put those values down as the value of time as a key resource, the value of people, internal to the organisation and external, the value of self-discipline, the value of good leadership, the value of objectivity, and the value of faith, actually. So quite happy to disclose the fact that I am a Christian, and it's something that I didn't say I was a good one.
And the military, did they sort of talk about that as well? Did they or?
Well, I was already I already had the faith before I joined the army, but I think that it's something that really carries you through in I don't want to just talk about all the tough times, but the tough times and the good times as well. Life has its ups and downs, and that's the way it's meant to be, and there's no running away from that. And I think that if you have something you can hold on to, which is essentially, well, your highest principle, I think your faith is really important. I know it is for me, and it is my highest principle. So, and that's something that may come through in this conversation in some other areas as well. But so there's six. What did I put down there? Six values, six things that I value that I was then able to sort of, I believe, take into the corporate world and leverage.
So when you're in business, right? So we'll go through in a sec your other parts of your career where you actually didn't go straight from military to business, as in owning a business. You went through the corporate world. So I guess throughout your journey, there's that word again, your journey. So throughout, I'm trying to think of another word for that. Your path between so you leave the military, right, and then throughout being in the corporate world, and even in your business owner world, are there things that sort of stand out to you now that because you've been in the military, I guess you see other business owners failing at? And I guess what I'm going with this is, are there things that commonly you see in business owners that they just don't do as well, but because of your unique experience, you kind of have a bit of an edge there, and they can learn from this podcast?
Look, I think everyone employs their own model, and far be it from me to say to someone, oh, you're not doing it right, or you could do things better. I mean, I've done some consulting along the way as well. See how I didn't use the word journey there?
Oh yeah, along the way. Okay.
So I have done some consulting, and that included with one particular organisation actually really stripping every process in that organisation and looking at how things were done and how things could improve. Essentially, that's what I was employed to do. And it was good being a consultant because I was actually external to the organisation. So I was able to employ that value, which I mentioned, called objectivity. And that is to say that when I was undertaking that task, it was not about, there was no emotion involved. That's something that I will probably, that might come up again in this conversation. There's no room for emotion really when it comes to making business decisions. And I guess in saying that, anyone that thinks about that would probably doesn't need it explained. But anyway, so yeah, doing some consulting, and that was an interesting time for me because what I was seeing was, in particular, these small to medium enterprises, 10 to $15 million turnover, so not huge, but what I was seeing was that most of the time, the main problem in the organisation was the owner himself.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, look, we can't take away from the fact that, I mean, the one that I'm thinking of was a very successful business, and he started this business as a youngster and done very well. But there's a lot that he missed out along the way in terms of certain learnings that I think could have helped his business to be even better. But you know, the
Did he start in business, or was he ever like an employee? Do you know? Or did he go straight to running his own business?
this particular chap was an employee for a short period. I think
Short period.
maybe 2 or 3 years before he decided to start up his own business. And like I said, you know, hats off to him. He did very well. But the problem is, I've seen this too, where businesses, they really go hard at the start. Just things fall into place. They have a product or maybe a service that is really, you know, people want and need, which is always a good combination. But over time, something sort of catches up with them, and often it's to do with the administration aspect of things. Like they have a great product or service, but all the support mechanisms that sit behind that.
Like they haven't done their operating procedures, things like that.
Yeah, things like that. Things that you need in order to sustain what you're delivering. The support mechanisms. You know, if we use a military analogy, I think it's something like for every soldier on the front line. You know, I think there are three soldiers, that support him. You know, with all of the logistics that sit behind that one soldier. And if he doesn't have those support mechanisms, then he doesn't have bullets. He doesn't have rations. He just can't really. He doesn't have information. So yeah, that is a common problem that I see in small businesses that start off really well and then sort of hit this plateau. And I think there are some things to consider at that point. And depending on the individual, the actual owner, whether he is adaptable, or he or she, I should say, is adaptable to change the actual methodology that they're employing in order to not change the world overnight, but in order to maybe manage their people better, put the resources in the right place and get those support mechanisms I was talking about up to speed. But sometimes they can't, and they're just too set in their ways.
When you say they can't, do you mean the business owners just won't change their way of operating? Is that what you mean, or?
Yeah, I think, look, it's a combination of won't and can't.
What do you mean by can't?
Well, they just don't have the wherewithal.
You're right.
What I mean by that is you can explain to them, look, and again, some will accept this. When you say, look, you've created a fantastic product and you've got it out there, there was a need for it, you fulfilled that need, but now that need, not only has that need been fulfilled, but you now have competition.
I see what you're saying.
So you need to change your strategy here because you're just not getting the same large orders that you were getting when you were the only one.
They're not as competitive as they used to because they got complacent and the market's caught up with them.
That's right. And I think it's at that point that they need to consider, if they're financially able to deal with it, I think they need to get someone in that can actually take their business to the next level, if that's what they want. Don't forget that not everyone wants to build an empire, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you have a model that works for you, because not everyone is driven by the material, not everyone is just driven by money.
Business has to serve the purpose. You don't just start a business to make money. You're probably going to fail if that's the only reason. But let's go back onto now where, so you had the military, you were in the military for about 10 or so years. And then let's talk about when you went into the corporate world. What was that like, transitioning from military to corporate?
Well, it was actually quite difficult for me anyway, because having been in the military for so many years, really that was my first and only job was was in the army, and you do, it is a life. It is a job, that's true, but it is a way of life, and it tends to uh, affect almost every aspect of what you do and how you do it. How you present yourself, how you conduct yourself, those sort of things. And so, yeah, I found it quite difficult. In fact, I almost decided to go back.
Oh, really? What was so difficult about it?
When you go through the whole training situation in the military, and I went through two key training establishments. What they do is they kind of break you down to nothing, and then they build you up. And so you're just nothing. You're lower than shark do. And then they build you up so you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, which was good for me because I'm only 5'7". But then they say, you're the cream of the crop. There are so many. They kind of build you up, and you do get a bit of an ego about yourself and everything.
and I guess in corporate, they don't. The skills it's a bit different what they're looking for, right? And you've also got probably more competition.
I couldn't get a job, mate. I couldn't land a.
Yeah.
People, I think they just looked at me as a bit of a Reggie Veggie. This guy's very, this sort of thing. And maybe he's going to shoot me, which, no, that was never. I mean, I can get those crazy eyes going, but no. But look, the truth of the matter is that it was a struggle because it was totally new to me, and I'd come from in the military. It's very task driven. It's important to remember this. And the military is really, when you're at peace, it's basically another government department. It's almost like a government propaganda tool, something that they use for political purposes and for their own means. But you are task driven. The word profit, what is that? That doesn't mean anything.
That's just government in general, right? It's a different
yeah.
It's a different mode of operating. But you obviously did get a job. So what actually happened? How did you get that?
I'm going to tell a story very short. I was so frustrated that I couldn't get an interview or anything. So I saw an ad. This is an ad in the paper for jobs back in those days. I saw an ad in the paper, and I just contacted. I rang him up. I said, "Look, I'm the man for the job. When do I come in and start?" It was just like that.
Is this a sales-based role?
No, it wasn't really. No, it was more customer service. It was more of a customer service role.
Yeah, right.
And they just said, the guy on the other end of the phone said, "Oh, well, if you're the man for the job, then you better come in for an interview, haven't you?" And I got the job.
If you really want something, you stick it out, you're going to get it, right? And sometimes a lot of people can just go, "Oh, I tried it. It quote unquote wasn't meant to be." Where the people who are actually doing things don't take that attitude. They are resilient until they get the outcome. And your career, it didn't stop there. So what was, I guess, the highest grade role that you had in corporate world?
Well, if you want to talk about titles, it's CEO and managing director.
So you get military, no real, you obviously have competencies and things that, but you didn't have the skills, I guess, and also the, just the sort of, I guess, the things that people probably were looking for in a job, like that civilian, a civilian sort of vibe, if you will. However, you were able to crack it through resilience, and then when you applied your military stuff, in addition to everything else, you were able to get up to CEO level. And I think it was an SME, right? It was small. It wasn't like a large company, but it was SME.
No, like I say, 10 to 15 million.
That's still good, right? How long was the corporate career? How long did that go for before you became a business owner?
Really, I started in the corporate game realistically in 1999. And then I went out on my own in, 2013.
Yeah, okay. So you're looking at about 15 or so years. My math's not the best, but roughly about that, I think.
Yeah, about 14 years, yeah, thereabout.
With your corporate background, was there stuff you learned in that's helped you in business? As in running your own business?
Oh, for sure. I guess just to quickly outline where I was working, or where I ended up working, really, I suppose, was I did end up working for the ANZ banking system for a few years. and also ended up working with GE, General Electric, which at the time was, I don't know where it's at now, but at the time it was either, if you looked at on the share market, it was either Microsoft or GE, was the biggest company in the world at the time.
Right.
We had 413,000 employees globally when I was there. I remember that. It was insane. But the reason I mention those two organisations in particular is because being so big, there was a lot that I learnt in those businesses that I was able to take into my own businesses once I became an owner. And I've actually written them down too.
Let's go through them.
Right. So just here's another word: unpack. The list that I've put in place here, and in no particular order, but I think it goes without saying, computer skills are really important.
Oh, especially today. I'm telling you, when you can type fast and work with computer fast, you just outrun everyone else like these days. Unless you've got most roles, not all of them, but a lot of roles.
That's true, but I've also just got in brackets there, being curious is important because I found that you can really get wrapped up in the technology for the sake of the technology. And in other words, you can end up being driven by the technology instead of you being the one driving the technology and getting out of it what you need. Because it can be such a time waste to go and get all these different rabbit holes. Oh, look at this function. Oh, it can do that. It can do this. Things that we're never going to use that. Well,
and unless you use it then and there, you've forgotten about it or how to use it about 2 days later. So, yeah.
But I was very curious, in particular, with things like spreadsheets.
Oh yeah.
Analytical type tools that I could use, tools that would just simply help me to speed up things. That's rusty. Okay. So definitely computer skills, which is a real basic thing. Now compliance, corporate compliance was really important because that's when you really get an understanding of risk management. In particular, I'm talking about commercial risk management.
What's an example of how that relates to an SME, like being a manager of an SME business?
Oh, contracts.
Yeah, okay.
I think mainly in contracts. So again, a lot of small business owners, they don't deal with contracts. They're getting orders for this and orders for that. But if you have a good understanding of commercial contracts and how they work and the degree of flexibility that is involved if you're entering into an arrangement, a memorandum of understanding or something like that with another business, you really need to make sure that you're looking after your own interests in those things. It's like if you've come up with a really good idea and you need support from another organisation, you really should get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, that says, you can't tell anyone else about this, or I have every right to take you to the cleaners.
Have you seen any horror stories where whether SME or large business has neglected to have their contracts or agreements checked off properly?
Look, I probably have, but it just doesn't come to mind.
Yeah, okay.
Probably more so in some ways, a non-disclosure is not worth the paper it's written on. In some ways, because no one, I just haven't seen people follow up too much on those sort of things. And
yeah,
but that's not to say they're not important. But I think what comes to mind more so is, as I mentioned before, something like a memorandum of understanding, and that's generally a service-based agreement where you say, well, okay, you're going to pay us this much, and here are the services we're going to give you, and this is how we're going to deliver them. And that can be, that can be, what would you say, sliced and diced, and there can be all sorts of different, what would you say, all sorts of different discussions around that in detail. And I think that in some instances that's really important, because what happens is we can easily get caught up in, oh, won this deal, ooh, yeah. Especially with someone like the Department of Defence or something like that, who are very commercially, contractually compliant and astute. and they've been doing it for years. So their contracts are like nailed to the floor, and they nail you to the floor.
Yeah.
But defence, that's getting into another ball game. That's a show in itself.
You learned a lot, so not just from military, but also from I guess being an employee. And I'm sure there's probably a lot more that we could unpack. I think sometimes as well, people have this dream, especially because we've got online businesses. You start your own work from home business and stuff, which is always harder than it's something good to work for, but it's always harder than it might seem on the front on the face of it. But there's actually so much you can actually learn as an employee if you actually have the opportunity. Like you said, being curious, you can look at you can be an employee and look at it as, I'm just doing my bare minimum to get paid. But the funny thing is, it's not your employer who's really losing, it's you as the employee, because you've got all these resources, which is people, knowledge management, probably training and stuff, that you could just leverage someone else's asset, which is their business, to help yourself in the future. So you sometimes think, I'm doing the bare minimum and my employer doesn't deserve it. Well, you're the one who's hurting yourself. The employer's still getting the work out of you. So that's you losing there, just so you're aware. So you've had your corporate career, and I think you said 2013 is when you got into owning your own business. Now, your first business wasn't one of the businesses you own now. So what was your first business?
Well, my first business was actually a tree stump grinding business.
It's a cool business.
Fantastic.
Very rinse and repeat. It's like a really good business model, I reckon.
Fantastic business. Just an easy business, really, because there's plenty of trees that keep.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Trees get cut down, trees fall down. You go and grind the stump, or you cut up the wood or whatever, and another tree falls down. And while they're falling down, other trees are starting to grow. Their life is beginning.
Yeah, there's always going to be demand for it. But you went from military to being like a CEO. What the heck made you want to buy a tree stump removal business?
Well, that's a good question, but the truth of the matter is, I just had enough of the corporate game.
What's an example of something?
I just got sick of the garbage. I won't use inappropriate language, but I will say that I was dealing at a level where I was dealing with politicians.
Yeah, okay.
I was dealing with unions. And look, I'm not very political. I mean, what I mean by that is I'm not politically correct at all. I refuse to be. I'm not a go along to get along person just to make people feel warm and fuzzy and let's go and hug a tree. That's not what I'm about. And maybe that's the military in me, but I just can't handle fake garbage. I like things to be real. And so the environment in which I had found myself from a corporate perspective, I felt that was slipping a bit. And that, again, because I'm happy to play the game, so to speak, to get the right outcome, but I'm certainly not prepared to compromise on my own belief systems. And, again, that's a whole new ball game.
But even, I guess, probably just the whole vibe of, like, you're probably more results oriented, and then you're dealing in an environment where, like, you can't, I guess it's kind of like things are just holding you back, and you're dealing with things probably that you're probably deep down you feel like is really just an operational waste of time. Was that part of it as well?
I wouldn't say so. I would say that with the last role that I had, I resigned, and I said to the actual business owner that I'd give him 3 months' notice if a certain contract that we were trying to win did not come to fruition. And the reason, and just on that particular business owner, he and I are still great mates. I actually utilise, he produces some items for me with the businesses that I have now. So we get on famously. So again, objectivity, not about making emotional decisions. And I just said to him at the time that, if we don't win this contract, that, I don't think you need a glorified administrator. I think you need to utilise those funds better. And so what we did, I did end up resigning because we didn't we didn't win the contract. It was actually one of the biggest defence contracts that Australia had seen in that particular industry, but we didn't win it. And that's the way the cookie crumbles, as they say. So I did resign. I stood by that. But what I did do is work with him for the next couple of months to basically look at his whole business and restructure. And he's still there and he's still doing well, and he's a great bloke, and we get on really well. So it had nothing to do. My leaving had nothing to do with being despondent in my work. I think that despondency is something that we as individuals, I think it can be a cop-out sometimes. Oh, I'm very despondent in my work. Well, sort it out, sunshine.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that some of the biggest whingers as employees that I've ever worked with, you go back and you see them down the street 15 years later and they're still working for the same mob and they're still whinging about
So, I guess the whinging didn't solve anything.
Well, but again, look, there are reasons for everything, and that also has to do sometimes with people being in a comfort zone. They're actually happy. They're comfortable being unhappy. And there is also some temperaments that if they don't have anything to whinge about, they're not happy either. So,
but why not get another job? Like, why did you decide to buy the business then?
Well, it was really. I was actually flipping through, probably online or something like that. And, look at that one. Nah, something so. Look at that one. Nah, and it was like, hey.
Oh, looking at different businesses online.
Different businesses, and then I went, actually, hang on, let's go back to that one two businesses ago. So you pulled that across and had a look at it, and I thought, tree stump grinding. My first thought was, is that how they do it?
Yeah, exactly.
I mentioned earlier about being curious.
Yeah.
One thing that had never crossed my mind in my entire life was, what do they do with tree stumps?
Yeah, it's just not something you think about.
Yeah. And I'd probably driven past and over many tree stumps in my time, but the thought never occurred to me. What do they do with tree stumps? So anyway, when you want a tree stump gone, there are a few options that you have, and one of them is to get in a contractor who can grind that stump out. And we're not talking, if you've got a little stump in the backyard. I mean, if you're not prepared, if it's an old person that can't take it out, that's fine. Get someone in there. But anyone else, just please and do it. But we're talking about stumps that are, really, really sizable. Anything that anything really at all. But you get a stump grinder in when you've got something that's more than say 30 centimetres. Because what you see as a 30 centimetre stump, actually, when you get down underneath the ground, it's actually much more than that. So Matt, when I looked at the businesses, the first thing I thought was, well, is that how they do it? And then there was one thing that I did before I bought a business, which I would sort of encourage others that are thinking about entering into their own business. I'd encourage them to do, and that is just the whole SWOT thing,
strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yeah, look, it's another bit of a buzz term, but opportunities and threats, whatever. But I think strengths and weaknesses are really important. But in particular, strengths. Obviously, not knowing your weaknesses is a weakness in itself. That's true. But if you initially focus on, well, what are my skills? What can I do? For me at the time, it was, well, I'm a mechanic by trade. I haven't been on the tools for many years, but I still remember the principles, and I do like tinkering a little bit. So I've got that behind me. I've now got a bit of business acumen behind me. I know finance and financials and accounts. I can, I know how to invoice and do all these sorts of little important things that need to be done. I know how to run an accounting package and things like that. So a lot of the basic skills. So I sort of wrote that down, literally wrote it down on a page and looked at other things too. What else do I do? I can play the piano. I can, I'm physically fit at the moment. All these different skills and attributes and whatever. And it's not a time for humility. You actually have to just say, well, what can I do? I mean, what can I do? And then once you really get a good understanding of what your competencies are, that gives you a little bit more confidence when you look at what's available out there in the market. And again, objectivity, no emotion.
And Tree Stump sounds it sounds like a good fit because obviously you can manage the business side of things. And being a mechanic, I think the terminology sometimes is unfair advantage. Well, when the machine's stuffed up, which is going to happen with anything, like heck, my computer, twice I had to reinstall Windows because one of the hard drives stuffed up, and because I'm semi-okay at computer stuff, I was able to figure out and was able to resolve it by spending like $50 or $75 on something, where if I knew nothing about computers, I probably would have paid hundreds of dollars for a repair or a new computer and weight and stuff. So it's a similar concept, but you're doing it towards your equipment, which is if your equipment isn't working, you're not making money. So I guess being able to sort of fix that and just have that as I guess one of your unfair advantages there, which makes it mean that it was actually quite a logical decision to also add all business models to choose that.
Yeah, and the fact that it was outdoors, I'd spent quite a few years stuck really pretty much indoors behind a computer, and I have to tell you, I don't like sitting in front of a computer for hours and hours and hours on end. I did it because I had to do it. I had a family that needed to be fed, and I had bills to pay and mortgage to pay. But there's something very nice about being outdoors. And so I rang the chap up and said, I'm seeing the business here. Is it still for sale? Yes, it is. So I went out and did a few days with him, and then I bought the business off him, and the rest is history. And I had a great time. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how long did you have that before you sold it?
About 10 years. About 10 years.
Did you have the Stump's business for that long?
Yeah, I did. I mean,
gosh, that went fast.
I transitioned. Obviously, I still owned that business when I started to buy other businesses, and I was mainly working. I was still looking after my customers in the tree business whilst taking on other businesses as well.
So you've gone from military, learned stuff, gone to corporate world, learned stuff, and now you've started to run your own business before buying and operating your two bigger businesses, which have employees. We'll get to that in a sec. But what were things that you learned from the stumps removal business or stump grinding business that was different to the previous parts of your career?
It really comes down to just the individual. It's a one-man band type of company. I mean, it's an owner-operator, basically. That's what it is. And when you're supporting, as you know, Matt, we had 10 kids, and so I'm feeding 12 people. We've got a home, we've got maintenance, it costs a reasonable amount to run a big family. And I remember, if I can sort of talk about this for a second, in relation to, I remember the night that I'd paid for the business, and I didn't even have a truck license at that time, and I needed a truck license to carry the equipment because it's big equipment. It's not just like a little lawnmower looking type thing.
No.
Big equipment. And I remember bringing one of them because I didn't have the truck license, so I couldn't bring the biggest machine home at that point, but I was able to bring the second biggest machine home on the back of a tandem trailer. And it took me about 5 goes to back it in to our property.
Oh.
I just remember thinking, what have I got myself into?
Yeah.
But, I remember during our family prayers that very night, I was sort of burning up. I was sort of like, oh my gosh, this is like, I'm under pressure here now. This is not like a paid job where I just get up and go, and I thought, Lord, how am I going to make this work? Have I made a big mistake? And look, after I asked that question, essentially, obviously in my mind, and I became very calm very quickly because the message I think that was implanted back in my head was just work.
Just work, yeah.
Just work. If you work hard and do what you need to do, you will survive. Your family will be fine. And so nothing ventured, nothing gained. No reward without sacrifice and all that sort of thing. But I think you just got to back yourself and have a crack. And I just knew at that moment that's true. If I just worked my backside off and just get some cash flow going in those first couple of months, like really go hard. Don't worry about trying to, don't knock that work because you're not getting enough money for it. It's a service-based business. Really, the overheads are quite minimal. So it really just came down to work. And I worked really hard. And that first month, I was expecting that I might turn around $2,500-3,000. I thought, wow, if I could do that. And it was $7,500 in the first month. And that was just from grinding stumps. And it was pretty much onwards and upwards from there.
Did you have to put more work into your first business, which was removing stumps, compared to what you were doing previously?
Well, probably not, actually.
So you took on more risk, but it actually is probably less work. I guess that's the trade-off, right? Sometimes.
Well, one of the I have been asked that question, why did you start grinding stumps? And there really are, it's not just one reason. There's some of the reasons I've outlined to you there. But look, another reason was that I just wanted to take control. I wanted to get away from all the hoo-ha and all the political correctness and all the garbage that was just annoying me, and probably making me a little bit aggro. And also things like, listening to talkback radio and watching, the news, reading the financial review, trying to keep up with everything in the corporate game. I just got sick of it. I thought, I'm not driven by money. So, and there was a time where I had this thought in my mind that, this is, let's pigeonhole what a CEO or a managing director is, and that's what I've got to be. And so I did go through a bit of a period of just finding my own feet as my own person in those roles, and that was sort of part of the growth process as well.
I guess it's different challenges sometimes when you run your own business. Like, you can technically, if you get really good at it, right, you can actually make more money really for technically less work or less effort, but you're probably leveraging all the work you put in plus the risk. I mean, that's, you're not getting the paycheck. So if you don't make any money, you don't get that nice little paycheck. You don't make money. If your machine goes down, you don't have any money. If you injure yourself, heck. So there's things like that as well. So moving on to now, you've sold your business, and even heck, you were transitioning your stumps business, where you were just doing that on the side a bit.
Yeah, that's another buzzword I don't like.
Which one?
I use it, transitioning. I use it first. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's all right. I'll forgive you.
Dad doesn't like his buzzwords over here, but that's all right. So then you got into manufacturing. Now, when you were in the corporate world, you were with the CEOs, as an example, you worked in manufacturing as an employee, right?
That is correct.
So when you bought Crown Industries, which really is like the leader in terms of hot water products, Australian made. I don't know if there's anyone else who really does in Australia. Well, what were the reasons for choosing again that business as one of your main businesses to go to?
Well, again, there are always many reasons, but I think, well, I'll give you a couple of reasons. One was that I'd sort of built this knowledge base in manufacturing, and so I felt comfortable that I could take on my own manufacturing organisation and have a crack at it. I also wanted a bigger business that would allow my kids, if they wanted to get involved, because I do like the thought of a family type business. And the key reason for that is you don't have to pay your kids anything, which is wonderful. So,
yeah.
Maybe take that bit out. No.
Yeah.
Well, look, it is interesting. The family business. I think if you're going about it the right way, and again, everyone has their own approach to things, but I wanted to give my children an opportunity to be involved with something, and that was. Call me paranoid, and that's fine. I don't really care. But the truth of the matter is that I like having my children around, and I like knowing they're safe. And I also like to educate them, and I wanted to give them, impart as much knowledge as I could that I had accumulated over the journey. But do it in such a way that was kind of different to I could kind of fast track their knowledge base and their ability to deal with customers and get orders and manufacture as well. So we've got a really good sort of, what would you say? We've got a really good cross section of skills amongst. I call them the kids, but they're not really kids anymore. But and they're not the only ones we employ. We employ other people as well.
Some of my siblings have obviously worked there. They've moved on to other things. Heck, two of them have moved to America as well to live there. So it's not like you enslave them. They can do what they want, just to be clear to the audience here. So with as well, it's that product-based business now. What were the main, I guess, what were the main differences or learnings from Crown versus your Stump's business?
Well, I mean, I'd worked in manufacturing businesses as an employee, and I have to tell you, it's a whole new ball game when you're the owner, and in manufacturing. I mean, I've worked in service businesses, very different, streets apart in terms of worlds apart. Streets apart, I don't know where that came from. Worlds apart in relation to just the business model. I mean, selling a service as compared to making and selling a product is just totally different.
Any, I guess, things that really stand out to you now of like, oh, if you have a service-based business, this is very different to product-based because X, Y, Z, and I didn't fully understand that until now I've got experience?
Well, I would say that the service-based business is more open to competition. I think depending obviously on what it is you're doing, but it's service. And I think that whilst service businesses generally have lower overheads because you're not outlaying money. Now, if you buy a service-based business, you probably don't need a huge amount of startup capital. But when you buy a manufacturing business, you need a lot of startup capital because if you don't have materials, as an example, and you get 3 months into it and you realise, oh my gosh, I need to spend $100,000 on this material because I didn't know when I did my due diligence because I just didn't know enough to factor that in. I have to fund that. I have to find the money for that. Service-based business is kind of different because you just don't have the same sort of overhead.
Have you had some stressful situations with Crown and your other business, Sesco, because of those nuances of a product-based business?
I think stress is another overused term.
We can't use buzzwords.
I wouldn't call it stress. I'd call it something more like anxiety beyond belief.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. But you do have. I mean, you can't poke the chest out and say, oh, it's never tough.
Business owners or aspiring business owners that should know what they're getting into. So I think it's good to hear that. Hear some of the negative aspects that they have to be aware of.
I would paradoxically say that most people don't know what they're getting into, and that's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing because with Crown Industries, for instance, we've had that business for coming on 6 years, and I'll just be upfront. If I knew what I was going to have to go through to build that business, to turn it into a sustainable business, I probably wouldn't have bought it.
Why is that?
It's just been a continuous juggling act. It's been a continuous, it's just every week is, you're employing a different strategy on different things. And you're just trying to massage things to get to the right model. But you can put it all down in theory, and that's great. That's wonderful. Put it all in theory, that's great. But you know what? Within 10 minutes, it's gone because the dynamics of the business are such that you find yourself, as much as you don't want to be, you find yourself being extremely reactive. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I remember this is something minor, but I remember that when we bought that business, I said, right, said to my wife, your mum, you know, we're just not going to change anything. We're going to get in there, we're just going to have this continuity from where it is now. We're just keep doing what they were doing, and we'll just, we'll learn the business, and it'll be wonderful. And, that went out the door within 2 weeks.
Why? What happened?
Well, it's a bit like this. If you're driving your car and you're on a long journey, and all of a sudden there's steam pouring out of the engine, you have two choices, and only one of them is really a logical, good choice. The two choices are we just keep driving, or the other choice is we pull over and have a look and see what's going on.
What was the steam in the business?
Well, I mean, the first thing that happened, which sounds so minor, but I remember the very first component that I had to buy. I mean, we had to buy stainless steel and lots of it and things like that. But the very first electronic component was a little LED light, And I contacted the supplier and said, we need another however many thousand of those, 5,000 or whatever. And they said, oh, we don't make that anymore.
Oh, that could be trouble.
And I said, oh, no worries. Well, what one do you make that's the same? Oh, we don't. Well, okay. Well, can you put me under someone else that does? No.
Oh, no.
Very helpful. And so what could I do? I just said, oh, well, thanks very much. And so then I had to think, whoa, I need to find this. I mean, this is a key component. This particular light goes on 80% of our products. But out of everything bad comes something good. So what it forced me to do was to actually just look at the procurement system, see, look at how we were doing things in that regard. And this is, like I say, this is the first 2 weeks. So I had to source that, and no, it's not just a matter of saying, I'll buy that one, thanks. I had to make sure that all of the specifications on that one little light were exactly correct. That would fit working with our product, And so that started me off on a new journey in procurement. And ever since that day, we've been specking up all our own components. We've been doing the technical drawings for those components, which we never really had a lot of that. And we've actually, we're not even, most of our components now we don't get locally. I would like to get them locally, but it's just not feasible anymore in terms of the cost. So we've created, from that one little LED light, we've created our own supply lines now globally. So we get a lot of our componentry out of India, China, Vietnam, and the like. And we have not once, for all of the gear that we've bought out of those countries and others, we have not been burnt once.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people say, be careful when you're dealing direct with China, or be careful when you're dealing direct with, Vietnam, because, they're going to screw you over because, you'll pay the money and then the samples will be great, but the production items will be terrible.
I think sometimes local business owners can try to use that card as a get out of jail card for not being competitive.
The landscape in Australia, I can only talk about Australia, the landscape in manufacturing in Australia has changed. And I don't want to use the term, but the dreaded COVID, ever since then, things have changed. And there is a reason for it, but I'll spare you all that detail now because that's probably a lengthy conversation. But yeah.
You actually recently bought your second manufacturing business. What was your rationale behind that, and how are you sort of, I guess, looking to make that work with Crown Industries?
I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I think, in my opinion, everything I've said tonight is my opinion. I mean, you can take it or leave it. I don't pretend to be an expert in any way, shape, or form. But I think being opportunistic is important. I think always being ready to have a conversation, even when you think that a conversation is not worth having. So you've asked me, why did we buy Sesco? Well, it was not on the radar. Our steel supplier contacted me one day and said, look, there's this other business, and this is a 100-year-old business, and the current owner's fourth generation in his family.
And what does Sesco do? I just realised I hadn't even asked that.
Yeah, okay, so Sesco is one of two manufacturers in Australia that still makes cake tins, and we're the biggest one in Australia that makes cake tins. And that's a whole host of, things for cooking. I could just call it baking. We also do camping items, campfire boilers. I think we're the only manufacturer in Australia that still makes the billy tin, the iconic billy tin. We do a lot of bespoke items as well. So we do a lot in the baking industry, where, say, a baking service may have won a big contract to provide, 200,000 hors d'oeuvres or something, and so they'll come to us and ask us to produce the bakeware that they need to accommodate, the ingredients for when they cook it in the oven and things like that. So we do a lot of customized stuff there as well.
Yeah, so you had the conversation, and what was it that made you think, again, being objective, like you said, this is actually a good thing for you to take on, given your current, your current involvement with Crown Industries?
Well, I think even the day I bought it, Matt, I was thinking, what am I doing?
Are you glad you did?
I think so, yes.
Time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. But look, it actually, again, it wasn't if it was an emotional decision, I wouldn't have done it. I actually wouldn't have done it.
And why is that?
I didn't know how we were going to make it work. In terms of, emotionally, I would have just gone, oh, it's too hard, So that's how emotions can work both ways, right? Emotions can be, yeah, we're going to do this, oh. And then we get there and we buy the business, then we go, right, what do we do now? What do we actually do? What do we make?
Yeah.
So just to go back to it, so our steel supplier for Crown contacted me and said, this chap is interested. He wants you to buy his business. I went, oh, that's nice of you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll just buy it now. Yeah, that job done. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be there in 10 minutes. So I just said, look, mate, initially I just said, look, we're not in a position, because we weren't in a position. I don't like going into debt if I don't have to. If I have to, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with debt if it's used wisely. But at that point, it was not really something that was on my radar. So, but I did say, I said, look, I don't think I'm interested. I said, but look, it never hurts to have a conversation. And so I went and had a conversation. I had a look at the facility. I had a look at the equipment. A lot of synergies in the manufacturing processing between Crown and Sesco. We had the right skills that we could utilise in that business as well, and just a whole host of reasons that just made it. It made sense. The facility there is 5 times the size as the Crown facility, and so we are actually slowly, but we are in the process of moving Crown across to be with Sesco, so we'll have both business. And these are not brands, they're actual companies.
Businesses, the assets. You're talking machinery, like equipment that's used to produce all this.
Yes, but it's important to note that Crown Industries is the trading name. Crown Fabrications Proprietary Limited is the company name, and Sesco is the business name for the other business. That's the trading name. But the actual company name is Sesco Fabrications Proprietary Limited. So even though they will be co-located, they're still 2 separate entities, legal entities. And that's important because it actually divests, your risk, the risk element that you have is actually separated. By separating those 2 businesses, both lots of assets are kind of protected from...
Two different entities, so if one goes under, the other one's protected.
Correct.
What's next for these 2 businesses? You're going to move the assets together, the equipment together. What's that to enable? Like, what's next for these businesses?
I'm not big on planning years and years and years ahead. It's just not my thing. I just think it's a waste of time because there's so much can change. no one predicted COVID was going to come, right? And so, COVID was actually, I mean, I think we all learned something from COVID. There were a lot of businesses that didn't survive. We were fortunate, thank God. We were fortunate that our business did survive. But call it a fluke or call it God's will, whatever you want. Certainly wasn't good planning. It was just one of those things. But we were actually, during that period, we were able to continue to manufacture our products, even though it was very difficult to get materials and things at the time, and even though our sales had dropped by 65%. So we were looking down the barrel in a big way.
But they've come back up since then, haven't they?
Oh yeah, yes they have. Yes they have. But the reason I bring this up is because it was only by the fact that we actually had enough materials to get us through during that period. So we learned something from that. What we didn't learn from a mistake per se. We learned from, again, everything happens for a reason. But let's just, for the sake of the discussion, let's call it a fluke. It definitely wasn't from any great planning on my part.
Yeah, right.
But we had already begun entering into a method that I call it my own little buzzword. I call it power buying, and it's where I increase over time. I increase the quantities that I purchase, and that can be a double-edged sword because you don't want to buy 100,000 of a component and then 2 months later realise that you want to send your product in a different direction and you don't need that component anymore. That's stupid. So there is a little bit of thought that goes into what we do there, but things like stainless steel that's a staple that's a staple material for us. So I spend a lot on materials because I never want to get caught short. And you ask any well-educated business person out there that's done all of their their degrees on in commerce and whatever, and they'll tell you that my approach just doesn't make any sense because I've got all this cash sitting in steel on the floor. What they don't understand is the fact that there are no steel mills in Australia, so I can't just say, oh gee, we need another coil of steel. Let's order it today and it'll be here tomorrow. Doesn't work that way because what we use is also specialised, and so no one provides it. So we have to actually bring that in from overseas. There are literally a handful of stainless steel mills, like good stainless steel mills in the world, and we obviously deal with one of them, but we deal with one of them through a third party, through an Australian company that brings the steel in. Now, could I save a lot of money by bringing it in myself? Yes, but that is one of those items that I would prefer someone else to take the risk on because it's really expensive. And if I go to China and get some second-rate stuff, I find out it's second-rate and I can't use it, I don't have a leg to stand on. Whereas if I bring it in through a reputable third-party supplier, then if they give me junk, which they never have, but if they did, I could say, hey, no, I'm not accepting this. And then that's their problem. So that's another thing to consider as well.
So you've developed your own methodology for procurement, and that's that's essentially, I guess, something that you've done that's really, really increased, well, the value, but also just the what's the word I'm looking for? Like just increased, made the businesses operate just a lot better by bringing that there, and that's probably something I'm guessing that the previous business owner didn't implement because, well, maybe he didn't know how to do it or just didn't have the skills. So you're able to take your skills and apply it to this business, these businesses that you bought.
Well, I think it was a different time. I think that even in the last, like I say, 5-6 years, things have changed. And the fellow that we bought that business of, I mean, he started that business 26 years ago and did an amazing job with it too. A very, very technically proficient chap. But again, we have different approaches. But the interesting thing is that my approach is not the just-in-time manufacturing approach. Have you heard of that term, just-in-time manufacturing?
I'm guessing it's like a lean approach where you buy things right when you just need them, kind of almost like the drop shipping, but for manufacturing. I'm guessing.
100%. It's like, because money on the shelf. So when you've got a plethora of materials and components on the shelf, that's money. It's dead money. You can't invest that money. Whereas I look at it differently. It's just me, and I say, well, that is my investment, and I sleep soundly at night knowing that I've got enough components to make a heck of a lot of appliances. Whereas it's an interesting story because Toyota were always big on,
They've got the lean approach.
Just in time manufacturing. Yeah, let's go the Toyota lean and green approach, and let's go, just in time manufacturing. Well, that's great when you're a multi-billion-dollar organisation and you've got enough muscle in the industry that you can afford to just say to someone, I want it here in 10 minutes. Because they've already got a bucket load ready to go anyway. They're going to make sure that it's there. But when you're small time, comparatively speaking, as we are, we don't have that muscle. And not only that, it's not smart anyway because often they don't hold the stock in Australia. See, when we buy steel, for instance, we have steel in our warehouse. We have steel that's been processed in our manufacturing. We have an order for steel that's going to be here in 6 months. And tomorrow we're going to actually receive the current order for steel. So we can't plan 1 week ahead. We're planning 6 to 12 months ahead.
That means that your customers, you're able to fulfill orders really fast than if you were. And I think that's really important as well because there's all these approaches out there, and I'm sure, like you said, like they're good. But I think it's also easy for people to misapply them. Like you said, Toyota's going to apply what's going to work for them when they've got different resources. But that doesn't mean that I think it's also a big thing I'm big on. I'm big on teaching my team is critical thinking. We don't just do things that just because someone else will regurgitate. We actually critically analyze and go, what makes sense for this situation? I think that's it there as well because you're not just going, I'll apply the lean approach. You're going, what do I actually need to do to solve this problem?
Well, just on that, Matt, just quickly, I'm happy to stand corrected on this, but I heard recently that Toyota actually ditched the just-in-time manufacturing methodology.
Did they really? I mean, I haven't heard of just-in-time. I've heard of lean, but I've never heard of. I don't know if I've heard of just-in-time.
It's kind of lean is very much process based. Lean is kind of more about processing. I'm talking more about procurement here, about the stock that you have on the shelf, so you can make stuff. And I think Toyota got caught short during COVID because
there's a lot of delays.
All those delays with the boats and everything.
I think it's a good place to end it there, and I think it's good to have some technical stuff there as well. Just as a wrap up, so this is for other business owners, aspiring business owners. What do you think is a piece of information, and it could be something you've also mentioned earlier? What do you feel is a key piece of information you could provide that's unique, I guess, for your experience for people who, along their business journey?
Maybe I'll tailor this towards aspiring business owners. That might be better because, there are a lot of people out there that are, have probably been in business longer than me. So listening to this, if they could be bothered listening to me and thinking, this guy's a goose, he doesn't know anything. And I'm happy to wear that. But the advice I would probably give to an aspiring, young business person is I'd say this. I'd say, first of all, get yourself a good mentor. Find someone that you know and trust is always good, and someone that you respect in relation to what they may have achieved in their working life. Because they can probably assist you in ways that you don't even know. So get yourself a good mentor. Never plan alone. Throw your ideas around. Don't be afraid to throw your ideas around to family and friends and just get a different perspective. There could be some real gems in what people say to you about what your ideas are, and that can really be helpful. So never plan alone. I think that's important, and that's kind of a military thing too, by the way. This gets back to the objectivity aspect of things, and that is to think with your head and not with your heart. So don't make business decisions based on emotion, because you will fail. You will fail. Mind you, someone will probably go out there and say, well, hang on a minute, I was very emotional about making this business decision, and now I'm a multi-millionaire. Good luck to you. Well done.
There's always going to be exceptions to every rule. I think it's a general principle. I think it's good. And I think that might even be something that, people who maybe are getting into business who maybe haven't been through as an employee, or even going through more of a corporate style role, where you kind of just learn to be a bit more, I guess, objective that's just because you kind of got to do that. That's what they sort of teach. But I think, it's something that a lot of people might not even learn if they haven't gone through that. Well, Dad, thank you very much for being on the show. Glad to have you on. Oh, yeah, one more thing.
There was just one more thing, Matt, there, and that is, in some ways, probably the most important thing, and that is you have to have an end goal. Okay, and now there are certain objectives along the way that help you to achieve that goal, but I think there has to be an end game for all of us, because that's going to be the key driver that pushes us along. And so that can be whatever it's going to be for an individual. I have mine, and you'll have yours. But I think it's really important to think about that and say, well, what is the end game here? What am I aspiring to achieve ultimately in this? In other words, what's the purpose? Why am I doing this? And I think that's a really important question that needs to be answered. And if you can answer that, you're probably on your way.
That's a really good place to end. Well, thank you again, Dad, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us, Matt, and thanks for putting up with Rusty. Where is he? There you go, Rusty. Say goodbye.
The idea is that you keep buying. I'm going to rain on some people's parades today about compound interest.
The only true compound interest that's out there are.
So the solution is